Good afternoon. Continuing our interviews for the Isla Festival here in the Cervantes Institute, we are with the acclaimed Irish novelist and critic John Banville. John, you're very welcome here to the Institute this afternoon.
Thank you.
You opened the festival yesterday. You gave a wonderful speech. One of the images that you invoked in the speech was a memory that you had of your first visit to Spain of a man on a horse. Such a clear Quixotic reference, such a clear Cervantes reference.
Cliché is the word you're looking for.
I did like that you mentioned that you didn't know whether it was a black horse with a white background or vice versa. How do you see the image of Don Quixote as it travels through the years?
Well, Sancho Panza is my hero. I don't care much for Don Quixote. Sancho Panza is wonderful. I mean, he is every man. Mm-hmm. And he's every man trailing behind a mad dreamer, you know. The world is full of us. And of course, it's you know, it really is the first novel, I suppose. You know, you could go back to Latin times, but I think Quixote is the first great work of fiction, certainly in the modern era.
Joyce said whimsically that it's the first book that's a little bit about itself.
Yes, that's true. I hadn't heard that, but yes, that is true. It is self-conscious, it is aware, it is self-referential. So I suppose it's more modern than it seems from that aspect.
Do you see it as a book that will continuously submit itself to the prevailing literary theories, let's say?
Well, I mean, I don't know. When I was young, I was a great one for theory, but the older one gets, the more theories fall away. You know, the academies must be supplied. They must keep working. Huh.
Comparative literature.
But the thing about Cervantes is that you know, it's great popular literature. Mm-hmm. Now, Nabokov hated Don Quixote. He said, you know, only people who find people being sick in each other's faces will find this book funny. And to a certain extent, I agree with him. There's a raucousness about it that I'm not quite convinced by. Mm-hmm. So here I am in the Cervantes Institute criticising Cervantes.
Bravely so.
Typical.
As Don Quixote might do himself. Mm-hmm. Your prose, interesting that you mentioned Nabokov, has been compared to that confessional narrative, famous of Vladimir Nabokov. Your prose, which has this extremely rich poetic element, one of the elements that was discussed yesterday in the roundtable was the boundaries between poetry and prose. Do you see those two territories as territories that cross over? Well,
my old friend John McGahern used to make a nice distinction. He said that there's verse and there's prose and then there's poetry. And poetry can happen in either medium. And I agree with him. One has to be very careful. Irish writers are in love with language. We roll in it like a pig rolling in mud, you know, flinging it in the air. So we have to be careful. We have to apply self-discipline. But I do try to make my books as demanding as a poem. W.H. Auden said that the poem is the only work of art that you either take or leave. You know, you can look at a picture and your mind will wander to think what you're going to have for dinner, or you can listen to a symphony and think about your girlfriend or something. But a poem, you either read it or you don't. And I try to make my prose at the same level of density and of... I want to make it as demanding as poetry. This puts a lot of people off, by the way.
It's demanding. It's interesting. Octavio Paz, the great Mexican poet, sees a very clear distinction. He says poetry aspires, it's beautiful in Spanish, this is a shoddy translation that I'm doing, but he says that prose aspires to say something, whereas poetry aspires to be something.
Yes, well, I would like to blur that distinction. My books, you know, you don't read them for the plot. If you do, you'll be greatly disappointed. You don't read them for the characters, you don't read them for dialogue, because there's very little dialogue. You read them for something else, you read them for an intensification. I see my books as, like all works of art, as quickening the sense of life, the sense of being alive, giving you an intensified sense of what it is to be human. That's what I aspire to do. And I see no distinction between prose and poetry in that aspiration.
When I heard I had this opportunity, I went digging through old books of yours that I've read, lines that I've underlined. One in particular that always struck me as such a difficult line from Shroud. I used piously to hope that they would not have suffered. He's talking about his mother and his father. But since then I've learnt about hope. It's always affected me. I always wonder, was that a difficult line for you to write? Do you find yourself a...
Oh no, I'm not involved in it. I mean, I'm not there. It's entirely impersonal. The notion that writing is self-expression is a false notion. And when I stand up from my desk and I finish my day's work, the person who did the writing ceases to exist. This is why when I meet admirers of my work at readings and so on, I can always see this sort of, you know, disappointment dawning in their eyes. And I want to say to them, the point is, you like the books, but I have nothing to do with the books. The person you're talking to has nothing to do with the books. He sits at the desk and does them. But when he stops, he ceases to exist. This is sort of a difficult concept, because people imagine, especially people who aspire to be writers, that they are themselves going to have an intensified sense of being alive. It doesn't work that way. And my writing doesn't work for me.
Have you developed this through discipline, or is that this idea of not one John Banville but a multiplicity?
Oh, I think any artist will have the same sense of disembodiment. Eliot himself said, you know, that the man who suffers is not the artist who creates. He meant suffer in the general sense. Being Eliot, of course, it had to be suffering. But I firmly believe that something else happens. Time becomes very strange when you're working. I always give the example. I was writing one day years ago, and my wife put her head in the door of my study and said, "I'm going to the shops." A moment later, she put her head in and said something else, and I said, "I thought you were going to the shops." And she said, "I have been to the shops." And I had no sense of that time that space having passed. There was nothing on the page even. So where was I in that period? And you know, I mean, that's the point of the kind of prose that I write. It's extreme concentration. I concentrate, you know, mornings will pass by and I won't write anything. I'm just sitting there, you know, and then I sink deeper and deeper and deeper into myself. Or I lose myself. I'm lost to myself. So that by 3 or 4 in the afternoon when I'm really working, John Banville has ceased to exist. There's somebody else there doing this. I use words that I don't even know the meaning of. I look them up and I discover that they're the right words. And that happens increasingly nowadays, that my workaday memory is fading because I'm getting old. But my store of words is intact. The day that I can't drag up a word from that store, I know I'm finished.
Characters in your book, a lot, seem to have been based on historical figures. What obligation to history do you feel as a writer when you create a character that?
Absolutely none.
Zero.
Zero. Novelists, artists are cannibals. We will eat our own children to make a line, or to make a corner of a painting, or to make a piece of music. We are completely and utterly ruthless. Because again, as I say, the citizen who goes into my study and sits down ceases to exist when I start writing. The artist is completely amoral. I have no interest in politics. The person who writes has no interest in politics, society, morals, family, anything, except getting this done. It's a completely ruthless process. And anybody who tells you otherwise is lying or is a fool.
I see you about town, time to time. Dublin. And my friend always comments on John Banville, the great wearer of hats. I wonder, if you'll forgive me for asking, it's a whimsical question. Somebody who's so involved, who wrangles with notions of identity, notions of consciousness. Are you? I love your shoes, by the way. Are you conscious of style? Do you follow fashion?
No, I like shoes. I like hats. I'm human, you know, but no, I'm not. Look at me. I mean, this is hardly fashionable, is it?
It's autumnal.
I'm always autumnal. High summer, I'm autumnal. This is my season. This is the season that I love. This is when Ireland comes into its absolute best. It is. I love the climate here anyway. I couldn't live anywhere else. The only city I've ever been in that I thought looked anything like Dublin in terms of light was Copenhagen. Mm. It has that silvery, melancholy light at all times of year. Very, very beautiful.
Style in your work, are you conscious of a signature that certainly the world is aware of?
No, I for the most part, I don't know what I'm doing. I work in the darkness. I work in a personal darkness. I don't know where I'm going or what I'm doing. I work by the sentence. Each sentence makes the next sentence, and that sentence makes the next one. And I work on the principle, if you look after the, what is the phrase, if you look after the pennies, the pounds will take care of themselves. If you look after the sentence, then the book will get done eventually by itself in some strange, mysterious way that I don't understand. When I was young, I felt that I was very much in control of everything. You know, when I started a book, I knew what the last line was going to be. Mm-hmm. But as I got older, I allowed instinct to work. And also, you know, you imagine that with age will come wisdom. It doesn't. All that comes with age is confusion. But confusion is a good state for an artist to be in. I think not knowing is better. I was always puzzled by a thing that Eliot said, T.S. Eliot. He said, the artist, it's no business of the artist to think. And I was always puzzled by this, and I still am to a certain extent. I do see what he means, that you have to work by instinct, you have to work by passion. But I am infected with the bacillus of thinking. I like books where I can see evidence of a mind at work. And I like my own books to be that as well. But it's very difficult to get thought into fiction, very difficult to get thought into art. I discovered that when I was writing my books on Copernicus and Kepler. To put actual science into fiction, they don't fit together. They really do not fit.
Do you have in terms of how people describe your work, do you have a preferred adjective?
Well, I don't know, because I don't read reviews. I don't read anything about myself, so
Banvillian.
I don't know what they say. Is it? Oh, that's nice. I'll get into the Oxford Dictionary before we know where we are.
My last question, John. The quote that I took from Shroud it refers, I think, to the Nietzschean quote that you introduced the book with. That words themselves, and the words that Nietzsche chooses in this case is "I do suffer." The words in general are perhaps the horizon of our knowledge, but not truths. Is this what drives you? Is this what this tendency towards a horizon that, as you say, you get older, you perhaps realise that things are more in the dark, but that you tend towards a horizon of meaning?
It's a good question. I strive to make my sentence as close to perfection as I can. I will never get perfection. You know, all works of art are failures by necessity, because they set out to be perfect, and perfection is not given to us. But that's about the limit of what I do now. I try to make the sentences as good and as rich and as poetic and as elusive as I can. And the rest takes care of itself. So you know, in the early books, especially in the Copernicus and Kepler books, a long time ago, the strive towards knowledge, towards cognition, is very evident in those books. But since then, my writing career, such as it is, has been a flight from meaning, a flight from thought, a flight from cognition, into something else that I haven't got a name for. Maybe that's what I'm trying to do. Maybe I'm trying to define what it is I'm trying to define.
John, thank you very much for joining us this afternoon. I hope you enjoy the rest of the festival.
Thank you.